So, welcome everyone to the first talk of the Lanfrica Talk series. I'm your moderator, Chris Emiswe. Today's speaker is Subha V, who will be giving us an exciting talk today. Subha V is a high school student who is passionate about computational linguistics and NLP. She is the founder of a nonprofit organization called Linguistics Justice League and a youth board member of Invest in Youth. She had been working and she has been working at the intersection of data science, natural language processing, and machine learning, which has earned her a Society of Women Engineering's Next STEM in Action Award, very prestigious award from STEM, the National Center for Women and Information Technology Aspirations Award, and a publication in the Journal of Student Research. Supervi, thank you so much for having this talk with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I'm really excited for the opportunity here. So hi everyone, I'm Subha, and I will be talking about leveraging natural language processing for education. So I'll get started here. So this is just like the table of contents of what I'll be going over. So first, I'll be going over the founding of LJL, basically my nonprofit, Linguistics Justice League. And then second, I will be going over the different projects that we're doing and the different outreach strategies that we have. And then third, I will be focusing specifically on one of the projects that we're doing called EduLang, and I'll be going over the app screens and what we do there. And then fourth, I will be going over the future work and our conclusion to the slides. All right. So I'll give a brief introduction to myself. Thank you, Chris, for also doing this. So I'm from Seattle, Washington, and I'm interested in linguistics, computer science, math, and I've been interested in computer science and math from when I was maybe like 6th or 7th grade. And I recently found out about the field of NLP maybe 1 or 2 years ago. In terms of my nonprofit, I'm the founder of Linguistics Justice League since 2020, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization which aims to bring awareness towards low resource languages. And, for hobbies, I really enjoy playing the piano and doing art, and you guys will see some of my art related to low resource languages later in this presentation. All right. So the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about was the founding of Linguistics Justice League and how, many people ask me, like, as a high school student, how did you even get this idea to start a nonprofit organization? Because I feel like many high school students might not have this aspiration or idea. So I guess my initial interest in nonprofits came kind of from a different sector rather than NLP, because I was learning about the refugee crisis from debate and like other activities, just hearing it in the news and stuff like that. I also wanted to kind of like search for organizations near me and like help out with this like big problem that I was hearing about. So 2 organizations that I found, Refugee Women's Alliance and World Relief, I went there in the summer. Not summer, I went there in like 2020 and I volunteered like virtually there. And I also like had experience volunteering at a similar organization, Atlantic Street, in the summer of 7th grade. So that's kind of how my initial interest in like nonprofits and stuff like that developed. And that's kind of how I did that. And then, the beginnings of LGL. So I guess Linguistics Justice League, we went through a lot of different like transformations. So we initially started as another nonprofit called MI STEM Education. So at that time, we weren't doing anything related to like natural language processing and stuff like that. Instead, we gave math and science classes to students at these refugee and immigrant organizations. So I remember we would host a lot of like virtual workshops with kids. We specifically focused on like female students for some of our workshops, and we would do like interactive games and stuff like that. And we also did like just after school tutoring programs for refugee and immigrant students. So that's kind of the startings of what we decided to do. And I have a couple of like illustrations that kind of help you guys like understand this. So I was like interested in math and science and coding from a young age. And we offered these STEM classes and I felt pretty good. So I wanted to do a little bit more after volunteering, just as a volunteer at Refugee Women's Alliance and World Relief. So that's kind of how MI STEM Education was born. So I think this is kind of the turning point from our organization and finding out like what are the challenges that happen when you try to do this. So one thing I realized is while I was talking to like the director of the organization, maybe in like March of 2020 or April, I realized that many kids like could not participate in our workshops or tutoring sessions because, they didn't have the needed English proficiency. And this number was pretty high, maybe like 80% of the kids, they, simply weren't good enough at English to follow along in the different workshops or presentations that we were going over. So that was a really big problem for us because we wanted to like outreach to all of the kids in these organizations rather than just, the ones who know English. And even specifically, the ones who didn't know English were the ones we wanted to connect with the most since they needed the most support in math and science and education. So that was kind of a big problem for us because we were like, we're not really serving the entire population here. So that's kind of when we thought like the root problem here was not like them, wanting to learn math and science. It was rather, the language barrier was stopping them from doing all of these things. Like even if they knew good English, they could probably read resources online and get access to different materials and stuff like that. So kind of that's how we realized, it's not really, math and science that they need help with, it's a language barrier. So yeah, that's kind of when we were like, how can we solve, this, really big problem? Because I mean, like, how can we like stop the language barrier and how can we help and educate these kids? So we identified like a lot of the children, spoke a language, called, they spoke Arabic. So I was like, okay, so over the summer of 2020, I was like, okay, I can resolve to learning Arabic and I can speak with the kids. So I thought, this would solve most of the problems because I was like, if I can speak their native language, then, they can also understand what I'm saying and they can get access to these resources. But, evidently that, did not solve the problem as I'm still talking here about LGL and low resource languages. Because learning Arabic, we realized, first of all, there are many dialects of Arabic and not all of the kids, spoke the same dialects. They spoke like various different dialects. And I will go to the next slide for a visual. But basically, we realized that, even not all of the students at the organizations even spoke Arabic. A lot of them spoke different languages, like maybe like Pashto or Somali or Kosa, or Ukrainian recently. So we realized, just one person, me learning Arabic is not going to solve, the language barrier. And that was like a common problem at a lot of these like refugee and immigrant organizations that, they didn't have interpreters in every single language the kids spoke. So oftentimes they would have interpreters in maybe the common like high resource languages, perhaps. But a lot of times the kids who spoke lower resource languages or, kids, they would be, left out because it was hard to find people who spoke these languages. So that's kind of when, we were like, really, what can we do to like stop this problem from occurring and stuff like that. So it was kind of a big moment for our organization. So that's kind of when we decided to learn more about like the importance of low resource languages. So I will probably, give us like basic definition for what low resource languages are, since I'm going to be talking to and like referring to them throughout the entire talk. So low resource languages are those that have relatively like less data available for training AI systems. So for example, high resource languages, like you can see highlighted on this graph, are like English, Chinese, Spanish, French, and Japanese. So these have like large corpora available to train these NLP models and get accurate results on them. While not every NLP model will be super accurate on these languages, at least they have the resources available. But we realized like a majority of like the world's, not a majority, but at least a significant portion of the world's population speak, these so-called low resource languages. So that's kind of when we have the statistic that 3 billion people worldwide speak a marginalized or low resource language. So this is actually a really, really big problem because, for example, when I was trying to communicate with the students, I was like, okay, we can use like Google Translate. Like this is super easy. We use Google Translate and the kids understand what I'm saying. But maybe as many of you all know, like, first of all, Google Translate isn't, as accurate in all different cases. And second of all, the language, options on Google Translate, while, there is quite a lot, maybe over 100, it doesn't cover, maybe the thousands of languages that exist, worldwide. So even like all the dialects of Arabic, there's only one like Arabic present on Google Translate. So we couldn't communicate with the students in that way. So that's kind of when we were like, okay, like this is a big problem. And this is an active area of research as well, like people trying to translate and do NLP tasks in low resource languages. So, how can we even contribute to this? But I think from this point on, I kind of took a step back and I was like, well, this is a really big problem. And I really haven't heard about this topic of low resource languages before. As maybe a high school students or even my parents, we were like, wow, this is like a new problem to us. So that's kind of where I also wanted to spread public awareness about low resource languages and the problem that's occurring. So that's kind of when I did some different like artwork on low resource languages that is kind of related to that. So I'll just go over this because I think it was like important to kind of like get my head around this issue. So I did some kind of like little cartoon series and figuring out why it's important to focus on low resource languages, for language preservation, because like 9 languages every year or 1 in every 40 days go extinct. So that's actually like a really, really fast rate if you're thinking about it, like 1 language in every 40 days is going extinct. And we're slowly getting to like less and less languages and less diversity, which is like a really, really big problem that we have to focus on. So yeah, I mean, this was like one cartoon series that I did here to kind of like illustrate this problem. And then the one on the right is kind of related to like the like low resource language like world, kind of displaying that there's so many different low resource languages like spiraling, through the world. But rather, the light, as you can see in this art, is only shining on the high resource languages. So it was kind of trying to describe like there's like so many different low resource languages, but when you're trying to identify the high resource languages, there's only maybe like 5 or 6 of these languages. So that's kind of where, this artwork kind of describes that. So I kind of wanted to also, in addition to building like NLP and technology solutions for low resource languages, I also wanted to bring awareness to the general community about these languages and present information in like a helpful way. So yeah, that's kind of when we were like, okay, this is like a big problem. So how can we like, find solutions for this issue? So that's what I was thinking. Like, can we hire volunteers from different languages? Can we get translators and stuff like that? But I was realizing, that is also kind of a challenge to find individuals who spoke these specific languages. And, as I mentioned, could we use Google or Microsoft Translate? We realized, that it doesn't have the language support that we need. So yeah, that's kind of when we came across, a solution to this, or at least like a step in the correct direction, was the field of natural language processing and people focusing on low resource languages and the importance of it. We were like, we could leverage natural language processing to help, provide translations and different services in low resource languages. So that's kind of how we, finally decided to develop content in their native languages. So that's kind of when another big question that usually gets asked is like, how can we find like motivated and like skilled volunteers to help with this problem? So that was also an initial challenge, with LGL, because we were just starting, it was just me and my parents also helping with admin work. And we needed to grow and expand our team since it was, difficult for me to work on, everything that I wanted to do on myself. So mostly we were like, we needed to find experienced volunteers to form teams to like work on various projects. So the main way we did advertising, we advertised through like the internet and our social media. And, we went on different sites like Volunteer Match and stuff like that. And I'm happy to now say that we have over 20 volunteers working at LGL in all different spaces. So I'll briefly say like most of our volunteers do like front end and back end development. So we mostly build our back end services in Python, and our front end services, for mobile apps, we do it in React Native, but we also do like HTML and CSS and stuff like that. So now we have volunteers working on all different projects at LGL, and we're really excited about that. So yeah, just staying updated with our volunteers on LinkedIn. We post like volunteer spotlights, so you can probably like check those out to learn more about what the team is working on currently. So yeah, we post one of those every week. So I've just included them of some of our volunteers, Naina, Lelam, and Shao. So yeah, what do we do today at LGL? So there's kind of 2 main things that we do at LGL in promoting our mission of spreading awareness and also building solutions for low resource languages. So the first one is like technology solutions. So we're building different apps and web pages like EduLang, Similing, Flashling, and Puzzling. So these are different apps and services that we're kind of like building like at LGL to help students who speak low resource languages. So they're all like basically like EduLang is the bilingual storybook app, like Simuling is like a synonym like word guessing game app. like Flashling is like a flashcards app, and Puzzling is like a sentence game app. So as you can see, all of these different services are, mostly like we're kind of using a gamified approach to help the kids stay engaged and also work on these problems. So that's kind of, like what we're doing here. And we're also trying to improve and like get user feedback on these different services. And in terms of like workshops and awareness, we're also organizing 4 workshops at Bolingo with kids from Ghana. And we're also doing a short stories initiative for kids around the world to share their stories. And additionally, we post like monthly newsletters and different articles related to this problem of languages and the language barrier in our newsletters. So I'll just briefly go over the different projects that we have. So one of the projects that we're currently working on at LGL is Flashlinks. So it's a multilingual flashcards that help learners recognize and memorize vocabulary. So basically kids, while using this service, they can log in and then they can do flashcards in English and their native language, which is a low resource language. And it can help them like build reading fluency and like by working from sight words to more complex vocabulary, so they can kind of work on a range of different tasks. And we mostly target learners from like 1st through 5th grade English proficiency. So I will say one important thing about like using like our services for kids. So one thing that we really stress is kind of like the bilingual component of our apps. So it's not just like in their native language or it's not just in English. We really want to have this like bilingual connection in our apps. So that also requires like knowledge of the kid's native language. So that's kind of why our services are targeted, maybe, not starting from like preschool and stuff like that. We're starting maybe like 1st or 2nd grade while they have proficiency in their native language, so they can make access of these like bilingual services. So yeah, basically that's kind of important that kids also have knowledge of their native language. Which also helps like with culture and language preservation. Like I remember speaking with like Rewa and how like the kids were really happy when they had like culturally sensitive books, and they have like food nights where they like share their different like cultural foods and stuff like that. So we also wanted to promote like using their native language actively in these apps and services. So that's kind of why the like bilingual component was really important to us. And I guess you can kind of see that on the logo as well, like seeing the tomato in English and the tomato in Pashto and stuff like that. So yeah, then learners will build their progress from one grade to the next, by like building their score and stuff like that. And that was another really important thing for us at LGL when initially designing our apps. I think like at the start, I was just like, okay, we can have like a list of words and then the kids just have to like go through and like translate them and then we'll score them. And then they just do that over and over again. So I was like, okay, they can just do these like worksheets. But I think maybe as a lot of you also know, like kids will not be engaged by like just working on different worksheets. Instead, they want to be engaged by working on like maybe like games or tasks or something that's like, at least they can like kind of interact with it. So that's kind of why I was like interested in not just providing like worksheets for kids to learn English. I wanted to create these like apps and services that could be like interactive and stuff like that. So yeah, that's why I was, mostly interested in this gamified approach. All right, so let me go to the next page. All right. So the other app I wanted to talk about in addition is called Puzzling. So it's kind of like a web game that allows users to like act as the translator. So basically they'll see a sentence in their native language and they'll have to translate it into English. So maybe they'll see a sentence like the dog ate, and it will be in like Pashto or something, their native language. And then they'll have to like type out, the dog ate in English. So our system will then give a scoring to the student about how well they translated and the areas of improvement. So kids will get a variety of different scores, like maybe they'll get a similarity score that kind of encompasses the other ones. They'll get a grammar score, a spelling score, semantics score, stuff like that. So kids can understand like, hey, I'm really having a problem with spelling, and then maybe they can work on separate tasks for that. So it's kind of to help students with spelling and identifying challenges when they're writing stuff. And again, it uses kind of like that bilingual approach because they're also going to be building like proficiency and mastery in their native language by seeing their native language text and reading it and stuff like that. So the users will get scores based on how well they translate sentences and get feedback on the areas they can improve in. And then the other feature that we also have on the puzzling files is like the puzzling files module. So it allows you to translate documents with images into multilingual content. So that can be pretty helpful. So yeah, in the future, we also plan to add drag and drop features for beginner users, in addition to adding like speech to text functionalities. So we want to continue improving our apps, and yeah. So this is just an example of the puzzling screen. So as you can see, you can probably see some Pashto text right here, and students can type their answer in the box and then get their score. So, and they can also start and reset a timer if they'd like to time themselves. And this is an example of the puzzling scores. So as you can see, they can get different, this is just like a mock-up screen, but they can get like continue, finish, share their scores on Facebook and stuff like that. So our team is like working on like building puzzling, and we're really excited about this project as well. So then I also wanted to talk about the Bolingo workshop and the short stories initiative, which are two more things that we're doing at LGL to kind of bring awareness towards low resource languages and stuff like that. So the Bolingo workshop, as you can see on the left, we're trying to, host a, fun workshop for kids to learn more about like world languages and linguistics, and just, get a better sense of, what's going on. So we're doing virtual workshops with our partner organization in Ghana called Bolingo. So kids can solve language puzzles, like answer fun questions, and kind of just get introduced to linguistics and what are low resource languages. So, I'm hosting these workshops, and our volunteers are also participating in them. So it's kind of another initiative that we're having to give back to the kids who want to use these services and stuff like that. And I think one other thing, we learned a lot of these kids, they spoke a language called Twi. So we kind of also wanted to include that in our services. So we're also starting to translate into that language using like the neural space API and stuff like that. So that's why it's really helpful for us to do these community outreach projects, because we also, while giving back to the community, we also get an idea of what we need to do, like as our organization, to help these students. So for example, if we found a new language that kids are interested in, or a lot of kids speak, then we want to also try to get resources and translate into that language, like we did here. So yeah, that was something that we were also interested in. And then on the right, we'll see our short stories initiative. So basically, we're also doing like short stories for kids who speak like low resource languages. So we want to collect moral short stories from around the world. So then we want kids to share their short stories in their native language, and we want to translate them into English and then publish a bilingual book for kids to, see what see what other peers are saying. And also they can also feel happy that, oh, hey, my book was, my story was published in a book. So, we wanted to do these different initiatives to also give back to the real community that we're trying to serve, in addition to doing the different apps and services that we have at LGL. So now I will be talking about the EduLang app. So let me go into the next slide. So I'll just give a short intro to EduLang and what it is. So you can probably see the logo in the top right corner and kind of guess like it's about like reading and books and stuff like that. So EduLang is a bilingual storybook app that aims to address like the challenges of the language barrier, especially for low resource languages. Because one thing we realized while also talking with our partner organizations and other people is that there's also a lack of multilingual or bilingual content available for kids who speak these low resource languages. So that's kind of where we were like, oh, this is like a really big problem, because if kids don't have access to like easy to read books, then, how are they going to like learn how to read in English and stuff like that? So that's kind of why we wanted to develop EduLang as kind of a way to help like mitigate the language barrier. So EduLang is like a library app for your phone. It's developed using like React Native, and it will be available on Android and iOS devices. So EduLang is actually available on the Google Play Store currently. The iOS store is pending, and currently we're in our beta version. So we support 5 languages right now, but like in the future, we plan to support about 108 languages, as we can like automatically translate into all of them. So currently we support Pashto, Kosa, Somali, Ukrainian, and Hindi. So we support these 5 languages. And then, yeah, we have culturally sensitive content for the books, which will be talked about in the next slide. And you can actually scan this QR code here to open the EduLang page in the Google Play Store. So I guess I would recommend you guys like, scan it and then check it out and then, maybe give us feedback on the app and stuff like that. All right, so I will just go on to the next slide. So I guess we also have like a small presentation about like EduLang and stuff like that. So there's 5 reasons why you should use EduLang. So we know that research shows that young children who are exposed to books and literature in their native language develop stronger pre-literacy skills than children who are only exposed to books in their second language. So this kind of research also supports our point that we really want to be creating bilingual, content for these kids. And then second, it helps with English learning without being constrained by the need to find someone who can talk to your native language. So this is kind of like going over the issue we found with translators, like finding translators into a specific native language can oftentimes be really, really difficult. And then third, we found the content is age appropriate and categorized based on the level of the reader. And then fourth, we have the really big capability to support, 84 or, I think over 100 now different languages in a single app, including dialects. So that was also really important to us when, like partnering with the neural space, like NLP, like NLP resources that they could actually do translations into different dialects. So I think for Arabic dialects, they have maybe like different, like maybe 8 or 7 different dialects like supported. And we found that really important because we also wanted to focus on like different dialects. And I think another important component was like a lot of people were like, oh, their dialects, they're very similar to each other. So, we don't really need to translate into the separate dialects. But maybe anyone who's here who speaks Arabic or knows about this problem, would know like it's really like the different dialects of like Arabic or even other languages are very, very different than each other. And oftentimes speakers of a certain dialect, like they can't understand like what other people are saying who speak a different dialect. So that's kind of why we were like, it's really important to also like recognize the impact that dialects influence on language. And then fifth, we found that a future functionality allows for users to submit their own stories, which are auto-translated. So this is like puzzling files that I mentioned before. So kids can upload like a PDF of their own story, and they can also be auto-translated into like their native language or something. So then on the right, there's just a small like diagram of like how it goes over. So there's like a UI layer, then we have these different services here, and we're also using the neural space services for the translation APIs. So this can kind of like help you understand how we're using this. All right. So I will just briefly go over how EduLang translates, because I think maybe this is the component most related to NLP, or, that might be pretty interesting as well. So basically the Python code that we have, it initially takes in a PDF of a children's book. And then basically it reads the images in the children's book and stores them as PNGs. And then it also detects the text using like bounding boxes and OCR methods. So then we call the neural space translation API on the text, and it stores like the result of the translation. And then we also find the optimal placement for like the other languages text and display it on the screen. And then we render and complete the PDF. So it's kind of like a multi-step process that we go through to do this. And obviously there's still different improvements that we need to make with our team at LGL who's like working on this. So I would like to say like EduLang, at least like the translation part is definitely like a team effort at LGL, and we're kind of working towards this goal. So here's just a few examples. So this is an example of like the bounding box. So as you can see, it detected this is like an example of it detecting the lower bounding box, and then also the translation above this. And then I will also, here's some examples of like final translations. So as you can see, it basically, detected the text here and then put the translated text above that. So I guess the other important thing is it like tries to match the background, and it makes sure that it doesn't cover up like the important parts of the images, because we also wanted the kids to like be able to see the images as well. So, this is one example from French. As you can see, I think these are like from the Cat in the Hat book. And this is one example from Pashto. So basically, we do something similar for translation. So yeah, we're really constantly dedicated to improving our translation services, and, having this available for like any book. So that's kind of why, we think this is really powerful because, with this, code, we can basically translate any book from English into a native language and make it a bilingual book. So that's kind of why we really want to refine this and have this, be really good for our app. All right, so I will just go over the different pages of the EduLang app. So I think the first page is like the registration page and like the login page. So users can basically put in their email address, their password, and sign up. So then one important thing we also wanted to talk about was like the people using this app will be children. So we don't want, children to give up like personal information and stuff like that. So that's why we were also interested in partnering with different organizations like Refugee Women's Alliance or World Relief and hosting sessions with children and parents to like log in and sign up together so they could, do this, process with their parents as well. And then there's also the home page and the book page. So the home page, you'll get a display username and you'll say, it'll say welcome to you. And you have the feedback modal here, which will open a different little tab for you to submit your feedback. So if any of you are interested, you can also do that. And then there will be a small settings page. There will be a list of books for the students to scroll through. So they can scroll through these and it only shows books that are available in their native language. So if they're a Pashto speaker, you can see here, these are all Pashto books. And then they can also mark books as completed. And recently we also pushed a new feature to the App Store that allows users to also mark favorited books. So a similar carousel below here will also show favorited books. So yeah. And then on the book page, basically opens the user's, the user's selected book. It gives a short description of the book so the kids know like what they're going to be reading, and they can either, start reading or mark the book as complete. So yeah, basically they can, do all these things on one page. And then this is one example of the book reading page. So basically it allows users to see the English text in learner's native language. So they can kind of like read through this. And then one important thing we also wanted to talk about the app is like we have the app available offline for kids. These books are like pre-downloaded onto their device. Because one thing we were really seeing, at least I was really seeing with the virtual like lessons with the kids, is that the kids who had like worse internet connection or weren't able, like didn't have the bandwidth to connect to like these Zoom meetings and stuff like that. It was really hard for them to like follow along in class, obviously, and stuff like that. So even with places with limited connection and other things, we wanted to provide the opportunity for kids to still be able to like read these books and stuff like that. So that was also really important to us. And then we have the completed books page. So kids can basically see the list of all of the books in the library, and they can also see the list of their completed books. So kids are basically able to progress through the app like this, going through the different books and then, marking them as complete and stuff like that. And then the learners can also change their like native language by accessing the settings icon. So this icon right here, they can click on it and change their native language. So yeah, I wanted to talk about language support for EduLang. So currently we support 5 languages: Hindi, Pashto, Somali, Xhosa, and Ukrainian. So then, in the spirit of Lanfrica, we also wanted to improve our translations and also translate into other languages. So I won't read all of them out for you, and I probably, can't, but these are all of the different African languages that we plan to translate into, and we have the resources to translate into. So currently we're only translating into Somali and Xhosa in our beta version of EduLang, but, we plan to translate into all these languages in the future. So then going back to the EduLang app. So basically on the settings page, users can change their native language to the 5 different options that we have currently. They can also select their grade level. So selecting their grade level will probably be important for the future of the app when we have different like reading levels and stuff like that, because we also wanted to implement something for users to select like what grade level they are so they can get like age appropriate content. And then they can basically save or either log out. And then on the feedback page, I think this is like pretty important for us to also get feedback for the app. You can enter feedback, submit the feedback, and we'll get like a notification based on your feedback. So we're kind of using this to improve our services. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about like the future work that we have, and kind of like a conclusion to like what we're going over in the future. So I guess one really important thing is, why is this talk important to people who don't speak like African and low resource languages? Well, first, I would really want to say that we, at LGL, we really want to promote and build diversity. So even within our team, we're really diverse in like the different places that we come from. Like we have team members from Africa or China or Korea, or even, across the United States, or, even Brazil. We have team members from like all over the world. And kind of in recognizing that we need diversity to form these, connections, we realize we need diversity, also in the languages and the resources available for different languages. So it's kind of like also related to the second point. We also want to bring light towards underrepresented groups, and we also wanted to solve the issue of the language barrier as a whole, because this is, not just an issue that can be solved easily, and we all need to work towards this issue. So yeah, and I think the also thing is like there's a huge number of people who speak these low resource languages. Like there's over 3 billion people worldwide and counting who speak these low resource languages. So, just focusing on the higher resource languages isn't, going to solve this problem for all of the different people. And I think that's also something that was, also interesting to me as a native speaker of an Indian language called Telugu. It's also considered a low resource language. And I was, very surprised to hear this initially, because I remember that maybe over like 300 or 400 million people speak this language in India. And that's like a really big number. So I was like, how could this be like a low resource language? And how can we not have the resources for this? And I think that's a similar story for a lot of different like low resource languages, like even Arabic. There's like many speakers of Arabic as well, but all these dialects are also considered low resource languages. So that's kind of why, as a personal speaker of a low resource language, and me trying to learn other languages like maybe Spanish, which is a high resource language, or even Arabic, I'm also seeing as a language learner the, divide in resources between different languages. Like when I look up Telugu resources, I can't find very many. So that's kind of why I was also interested in a personal standpoint about the impact that this like organization could cause. So yeah, then I just want to talk about like future work and EduLang to kind of like wrap up this talk. So we're still in the beta version, and we wanted to add like additional language support in the future and have like automatic translations available for the kids, like through a function on the app. So that was also important to us, because we also realized that what if kids have like a story that they want to be translated, and they don't like have anywhere to get translations for it. So we also wanted kids to be able to upload a PDF of their story that needs to be translated and have it translated, like automatically into different languages. And then yeah, definitely like adding different reading levels for kids to like sort by and go through that. And also adding a text to speech option for kids to hear the storybook out loud. So the text to speech option was like really important to us as well, because we know like Neural Space, like the organization we get translations for recently, I think in May, announced their, speech to text and text to speech availabilities. And that's something we also really want to leverage for the kids, because we were like, when learning a language, like reading and writing are important. And that's kind of what we're doing here right now. But we also recognize that pronunciation, speaking, kind of like hearing the language, being able to understand like audio and stuff like that, is also a really big part of like learning in language, like speaking and stuff like that. So that's kind of why we also wanted to add text to speech options to all of our services, not just EduLang, to help the kids like really get that, fundamental learning in their native and English. And then we also wanted to kind of improve on the gamified approach by adding like a points or gardening system for the kids to feel engaged. I was mentioning gardening because, or maybe kids could potentially, my idea was maybe kids potentially, if they read a book, they could be able to plant a flower in like a related page, and they could see this flower grow as they read more books. So that was just like a, an idea that I had. So I thought this could, help kids and help them be more motivated to kind of work towards this. And yeah, I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about was how can the community help, and how can we like kind of work towards this mission? So I also wanted to like mention, you can probably follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook to get different updates on what we're doing. Like I mentioned, we do different like volunteer spotlights every week. We also have a newsletter that you can subscribe to. And we have a lot of different like different posts that we make about low resource languages, like the different artwork that I do, stuff like that. And then, please email info@Linguistics Justice League to join our newsletter, or for any other queries, like you're wondering what our organization does, or you have any questions, please, email this email address and we'll get back to you. And then I think the other thing is, if any of you guys are interested or have technical or other, artistic or writing experience, please volunteer if you have the time. So go to linguisticsjusticeleague.org/get involved. I think Chris will put the links as well. But basically, you can volunteer and you can join our amazing team of volunteers who are actually working towards and building these different products and services. So we have a lot of different volunteer slots available for both front-end, back-end work, artistic or writing experience. So yeah, that's something we're really interested in. And then also, if you speak Pashto, Ukrainian, Kosa, Somali, or Hindi, for our beta version, we really want to also get proofreading or corrections for this to make sure that our app, is a high quality service. So please email info@linguisticsjusticeleague.org if you're interested in proofreading or correcting translations. So that was also important to us. And then lastly, I would just like to say maybe downloading EduLang and giving us feedback through the in-app function would also be really, really helpful for us as well. So yeah, I think that basically concludes the material that I have for this talk, and I'm open to any questions or concerns and stuff like that. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Super V. That is really amazing. I personally really love the work you're doing at Linguistics Justice League, EduLang, and it's really amazing. In my opinion, you're combining. It's not just one aspect of NLP like translation. You're taking in OCR. You're also working on the dialects, and you're trying to also put the gamified approach so that it really speaks well to kids. That's really beautiful. I have a ton of questions. I will first see if anyone from the audience has a question before I ask mine.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, thank you for posting links. Yeah, those can be helpful for anyone trying to get involved and stuff like that.
So anyone, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can write on the chat. Probably better to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Subha. Hi, guys. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I like your work. I really appreciate it. It's very fascinating. I like it, and I want to thank you very much. I'm also in it. I'm not also a native English speaker, so I have passed through that struggle. So it's really helpful for people who are like me. So I appreciate it. And my question is on EduLang. So you are using translation. So you are using your space API for translation. So I think the translation is currently working and not too powerful. For example, when I get trouble with my English, I go to Google Translate and I try to translate my native language to English, and I'm usually not satisfied with Google Translate. And when it is about teaching students about another language, it can mean teaching something wrong. So how are you dealing with this, especially for low source languages? The accuracy with machine translation is currently not good, I think, not too good. So I really have a concern about this. So I want you to explain more on this. And another question is, I feel like you focused on teaching students English language. Maybe the current barrier is not English only. For example, for people who are in West Africa, their education system is based on French. So French can be also another barrier for studying the education. So yeah, how are you dealing with this? I think are you clear with my questions?
Yeah, I understand your two questions. Thank you for asking them. Yeah, so for your first question about machine translation accuracy, that's definitely a big part of why we were also concerned. What if machine translation isn't accurate, or how can we work towards this? So I think I know like neural space gets a lot of like at least like during the like testing phase of that, they get a lot of people who speak these languages to verify the translations. But even for us when we're doing our tasks, that's kind of why we're looking for like different beta testers who speak these languages to kind of verify our children's books. So that's kind of why the ways that we're trying to mitigate the errors that come up with machine translations. But I would also like to say, like, it's not as big of a problem as maybe we think it is, because because a lot of the content that we're translating currently that are available in our app, they're like children's books, right? So they're very simple sentences, like I eat, like maybe I eat a chicken and stuff like that. Like they're very simple sentences that usually the machine translation systems, they don't have a problem with simple sentences, and rather the errors come up when you're more dealing with like common sense reasoning, maybe different kinds of like complicated grammatical structures, stuff like that. So I think our focus on children's books and translating children's like content for children kind of helps to mitigate the like issue that machine translation holds. But yeah, we're still very committed to like getting people who actually speak these languages to verify our translations and stuff like that. So like, yeah, that's kind of regarding the first point. You know, it is still an issue, but we hope that it's not as big of an issue if you were like translating actual like novels and stuff like that. Because I know a lot of times like they, with these complicated language that we might have in English, it misses the point of like the story and stuff like that, and it detracts from the story. But with these simple sentences, I hope it's not as big of an issue. And then for the second thing, yeah, we also realize like not everyone is trying to learn English. And maybe, like you mentioned, kids in West Africa are trying to learn different languages, stuff like that. And that's also something that we kind of want to do in the future. So rather than having different low resource languages to English, we also want to just have like low resource languages to like all languages and stuff like that. So currently we're starting with English because we have like a user base of like students already coming in the United States as like refugees. So that's kind of why we were starting with English and like doing that. But that was also like our plans for the future as well, because if we can have these like automatic translation features available in the app, we can just basically do any language to any language translation. So that was also important to us, like as an organization. So that's kind of something we also want to work on that in the future rather than just going to English. Thank you, though. That was a good question.
Okay, Aman says thank you on the chat. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the talk, Subha, and I love your work. And then I'm primarily concerned. I deal with children before now, so I basically taught Jolly Phonics and diction for kids. So I don't know how you plan to but I love your idea about the gardening. It makes a lot of sense actually. But then how do you intend to solve some issues about the ranking? Well, I know that you have stage to stage selection. Say, okay, maybe you are in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and 4 and 5. Then how do you make distinction clearly that, okay, this, since you are dealing with simple sentences, right? So what makes the distinction between a grade 1 comprehension of, for example, and a grade 5 comprehension if you are dealing with simple sentences? And then my second question is, how do you intend to teach the sound differences among different languages? Okay, you know, some language like African languages like Yoruba, for example, and Igbo, they kind of have a transparent writing system where you speak as you write or you write as you speak. In a situation where you have Arabic, where you're talking about transliteration, so what's your plan about getting the text from the core Arabic in quote to the transliteration and down to the language that is being learned? So I think maybe you could consider maybe a suggestion of trying to have Arabic language, for example, and say, okay, now people in Egypt, they speak other local languages, but they have Arabic as their primary language. So Arabic, in that sense, is actually low resource, right? But then we only get someone that speaks Arabic and that local language to be able to use the app. So if your focus is the low resource language, why not have maybe a kind of Arabic and then the local language, then back and forth? then
Right.
you would have to specify whether it is a transliteration of the Arabic or the core Arabic, I mean core in quotes. So I don't know how you get my questions.
Okay. I think I understand the first one, so I'll go over that first, and I might need a little bit of clarification on the second. So for the
Okay.
first question, yeah. So like when we're dealing with basic sentences, I think the one thing that we have like for puzzling, for example, or even our books, they're basically already sorted by like grade level. So we have like online sources that like say this is a first grade level book and they like meet to certain standards and stuff like that. So I think even with like the books and stuff like that, even if it's like basic sentences or it's not as difficult sentences for like fifth graders, we also like think like the amount of like sentences available in the book, like maybe if it's a longer book or a shorter book, maybe younger kids have shorter attention spans while older kids will have longer attention spans. We kind of like plan to vary these across the different books to kind of differentiate between grade levels. So yeah, because most of our like grade level distinctions come from like already come from like the websites that are giving us these books, and like Open Hearts Big Dreams, like our also partner organization, it kind of like they already categorize these books, so we kind of get them from there. And I think the level of the book is also determined by how long the book is and like how hard the concepts are to understand. So that also kind of plays into the factor. While the sentences might be quite easy because all of these students are trying to learn English, there's kind of like there's differences in the books. And then for the second question, you were mentioning something about like Arabic, like transliteration to help students and like who speak low resource languages. So I think is it like related to like we want to also translate from like we don't want to translate from like just stuff to English, like low resource languages to English, but we also want to translate from like low resource languages to other low resource languages. Was it like something like that?
Yeah, the second one, I think.
Yeah. So that was also our thought as well. I think in addition to my like response from the last question, it's something that we want to add in the future because we realize like not everyone is trying to learn English, and we want to like kind of create any to any translation, which I think is actually something that's possible for our app and services, because now that we already have like the code built to translate in from some language to English, we can basically swap out English with like another language that's available on the Neural Space API and just kind of create this like translation available between any different languages. So that was also something we were interested in, but I guess for the initial phases, we're doing it to English.
Okay, so I have a kind of suggestion. Okay, if you have, well, I've dealt with TESOL students, basically, and then I don't know whether you consider putting a timer for the reading. Okay, for example, if you have a reading of a passage, so you could have a timer. Okay, for
Yeah.
this reading, it should take you time, right? Then I don't know whether you have a way of teaching correction in that, okay, if you mispronounce a word while reading, for example, then you can get the correction or you can get it struck out to show that you didn't pronounce it well. Those are just techniques used in phonics to teach people, students reading, so that they will not only learn the pronunciation of the word individually, but also learn it in connected speech. So I don't know whether you consider those things, but these are my suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great idea for like the book apps function, like maybe a speech to text function can help kids like go through the book and read them like correctly out loud. I think that's a good idea though. I think all the speech to text stuff is something we really want to work on in the future as well. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions? I think we have about 2 minutes for if someone has
Hello,
more.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Subha. It's a great presentation, and your work is very impactful. It needs not be overemphasized. But then I wanted to get this from your experience in the refugee settings and say other low resource language groups when you worked earlier with them. So I also did something like that in Germany during refugee crisis around 2015, but then also during COVID. And one of the things we realized is that, well, speakers of lower resource languages actually do not also write and sometimes read their languages. So it tended to be more speech data. So one of the
Right.
ways, for instance, that we sent out information to them was to include, say, short audio messages in addition to the written content. I mean, what you're doing is great, but let's say, so one of the fascinating things about lower resource languages is that although say there's not a lot of data available in terms of text, there's quite substantial data in terms of audio. So today, if you were to go to TikTok and you are supposed to say, look out for lower resource languages, there are like huge tons of audios and videos available. Maybe they're not marked, so we don't know that there are these languages. And then they are available like on, so is it possible to leverage, say, audio data on TikTok, YouTube? Is that a thing? Is it even possible to do?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think even stuff that I've heard as well was like sometimes languages only, sometimes some languages aren't even written, they're just spoken. So we don't have any written, stuff to use for the app for some of these languages. So yeah, I think it's not impossible to use like this, massive available online, data that we have on YouTube and TikTok and stuff like that to train these models for like audio and speech recognition of low resource languages. And I think people are already working on this kind of task. So yeah, I mean, like in addition to everything, we also want to kind of work on the speech and audio, speech and audio kind of recognition and stuff. And we're planning to kind of work on and deploy products for that in the next coming year. So it's actually like a really big importance to our organization. And I don't think it's impossible by any means. So I was very interested in that. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if anyone had any questions. There is so many questions. That's really great. I have just one last question. I think so. The app, it's really great, and I love the way like the gamification strategy and the translation and OCR. Are there plans to integrate this in schools and classrooms?
Yeah, that was something we were really interested in. So that's kind of after, so we have a product demo for the app at the end of this month, I think on the last day, July 31st. So that's why we were interested on also integrating it in real classrooms with like kids, maybe like at different refugee organizations locally. So kids can also, that's kind of what I touched on as well. It's like kids can sign up with their parents and their parents can kind of go through the app functions with them. So yeah, there are definitely a lot of plans to also use this in the classroom during their like quiet reading time. Maybe they have like structured reading time during like different activities they have at the organization. So that was something I was really interested in as well. So yeah, that was actually a plan for our organization.
Okay. Thank you very much. One of the participants asks, how do you get the dialects for the African languages?
That's a good question. So I think for some of the I think not all of the dialects, are obviously available, but for the ones we have, I think it's just through like the neural space API and them getting like data for African languages and then creating these models to translate them. And then for us, it's also important to get like information from like real speakers of these African languages as well. But I will check on like the dialect availability for African languages because I know for Arabic, they have a good selection of dialects, but maybe for African languages, I know they have a lot of different African languages available, but specifically for the dialects of African languages, I'm not sure. So that's something I should probably check into.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I think I will have to round off here. I see everyone is really excited and very wonderful that so many questions are coming. I put the links on the chat to reach out to you. I'll also put it on the recording video and to reach out to Linguistics Justice League. So thank you very much, Subha, for this wonderful, amazing talk. It was truly amazing knowing about the great work of Linguistics Justice League, how you started, the intuition, the wonderful apps, and the ways you're leveraging natural language processing for the endangered languages. It's truly it's like a slap in the face when you see 3 billion people, with low resource languages. It really shows how important this space is, how important what you're doing. So thank you so much. To everyone out there, this was series 1 of the Lanfrica Talks with Subha. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for another awesome talk we have in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.